All right, here's Holga Land. I'm so excited about the start of this journey together because I'm quite the fan of Holga, and I'm sure you are too. You will be. For one thing, what's not to love about a camera that is so just playful and lightweight? I seriously think that maybe part of what makes the Holga such a successful art making tool is that it doesn't feel as intimidating and weighty as a really fancy camera, right? I mean, it's a toy camera. And I think those of us who've had drawing class are quite familiar with the, what I call the Stonehenge syndrome, when you have a cheap piece of newsprint and a piece of charcoal, like vine charcoal in your hand. You're a drawing genius, right? Because the stakes are super low. In fact, if you go to Nichols, that vine charcoal will cost you $0 because we made it the semester before. But if you're like me, if you stick the slightly more pricey stick of compressed charcoal into my hand and then give me a sheet of expensive Stonehenge paper, my drawings will suddenly become, it's like my hand is made of wood and they're terrible. So I don't know, maybe we can translate a little bit of that that sense of freedom to experiment, that sense of kind of maybe withholding judgment a little bit, to using the Holga camera. For starters, before we go anywhere else, I want to strongly suggest that you also make yourself a chart like this before you even head out. So you remember to fill it in. We all say we're going to remember these things, but if you are fairly new to working with film cameras, you may not be so immediately aware that we don't have metadata anymore to fall back on to when we look at our photos later and we go, oh, why didn't that come out? We can't just, go to Bridge and find out. We got to write it down. So here, hopefully you can read this all pretty well on the screen. I always, of course, write the date. Sometimes I write 200, but I meant 2020. And for the Holga, for reasons that will become apparent, these are the 3 important things to write down for each picture that you take. You would think that aperture was missing here, right? But it's not. And again, if you were kind of keeping track of digital stuff, you could be switching ISO. But you can't do that mid-roll when you're shooting film either. So I do write up here, if you notice, I have pan F plus, I'm slow here, pan F plus at EI 50. So that corresponds to the roll of film that's going to be in my camera, and yes, its ISO is intended to be 50. So what does it say EI? That means exposure index. That's what it's short for. And any of these films, the manufacturer's sort of target ISO is 50 in the case of pan F, but you could rate it lower or higher to suit your needs. You could shoot the whole roll as if it were 100 ISO, then we would say exposure index 100, or you could slow it down even more and rate it at 25. Those are one f-stop apart, right? 25, 50, 100. So those are, I bring this up because that's a way to be a little more flexible with whatever film you've purchased for use in your Holga. Just because of, the number on the box doesn't mean that that's what you're stuck with if you're out on a shoot. The thing is, you're going to need to develop that film differently when it comes to picking the time and dilution of developer that you use. And so you do need to commit to the entire roll. Now, happily, we only get, count them, 12 exposures on the Holga when we're shooting with the square mask. And so it's not exactly a horrible long-term commitment. What about the rest of this chart? So, subject, We write in the subject along with the number simply because it may be that something really screws up, like maybe you loaded on the reel wrong and your film comes out blank for what we think is maybe the first 4 or 5 exposures, but we're not sure. Or there's sort of a series in the middle that don't turn out. They all seem underexposed to the point that you can't see what's in the picture. Anyway, whatever the reason, I like to go with both a numerical thing and a description of the subject so that I can find my place again in the data if there's a section of it that just doesn't come out at all. So for instance, if I'm shooting right here, my subject might be listed as Holga boxes and gear, just something that to your mind, when you see it, you'll go, oh yeah, that picture I took on my table for that demo I was doing for beginning, or intermediate too, rather. Light conditions. Describe them to the best of your ability because that is going to help me diagnose if maybe something went wrong in your interpretation of your light meter or whatever system you used. So in this case, right now what I have off camera that you can't see is I've got a couple LED lights aimed at this scene. But obviously it's indoor lighting, right? So I might, in this case, just write indoor studio lights. A variation might be, maybe I go outdoors next and I take pictures. Well, right now it's raining, so I would write, soggy dog in carport, maybe for the subject, who knows what awaits. And then here, if I just said in carport, I would write overcast day, subject in shadow. So it's where your subject is that the lighting conditions are important. If it's a sunny day, but your subject is in the carport, we don't write sun for the lighting condition. The lighting condition applies to what light is falling on your actual subject. So I would say overcast day in shade. That gives me a feeling of how much light is probably coming in under that shaded carport. And so then finally, aperture is kind of an absolute on the Holga, especially since you're checking one out from the department. I'm not going to encourage you to make any modifications to the existing aperture for reasons we'll discuss later. Honestly, in the factory, the difference between those two aperture settings is really pretty negligible. So, you could write that down if you want. You could make a record of what you set it on. But as you know from the handout, it's pretty much sort of going to fluctuate around f8 or f11. So then that remains, or all that remains is the shutter speed. And so using either your DSLR or a metering app or something like that, you would figure out to the best of your ability what sort of shutter speed you would need to do to take this picture. Since we're shooting at 50 ISO and we're indoors, my guess is that's going to be really, really slow. So air quotes shutter speed is really going to sound more like a time situation, and I don't know, ballpark, I'm just going to guess that it's going to be a 1 minute exposure, to write that in there just to show you. But I'll talk to you about using apps in another video as far as metering goes. Whatever your light meter suggests, that's what you write there. All right, so you're going to fill that out for your entire first roll on the Holga, unless you already had super duper amounts of experience with this camera in the past, or you've been shooting a lot of film in a lot of other types of cameras and this just seems like baby steps. That's fine, then go ahead and don't. But for everybody else who's ever, made a mistake in their life perhaps and might need a little help figuring it out, hint, hint, this is really important. I can't tell you, it's so sad when a student comes to me and I say, hey, did you develop your film? How'd it come out? It didn't work. What do you mean it didn't work? It just didn't come out. Well, there was just nothing on it. I could maybe help you discern whether that the mistake happened in camera or in the developing process if A, save those negatives. As much as you might hate them because you just spent an hour trying to develop them and they came out clear and broke your heart, save them so I can look at them, because there are, again, ways that I can kind of, figure out where the problem might have been and prevent that from happening again. And then 2, there may be some hint of a little bit in these notes combined with those negatives where we can make that next roll come out better. That's that for this video.